Well, hello, friends. Greg Koukl here, and I am the host of this show called Stand to Reason. Thank you for joining me and being part of it, even if listening. If you'd like to call in, of course, you're welcome to do that. Our number is 855-243-9975. That's 855-243-9975. Now, that number is only good while I'm here live, which would be right now. If you're listening by live stream. And for others not on live stream, make a note. It's the show is from 4 to 6 on Tuesday afternoons, and that would be Los Angeles time. And let me say this, just mentioned Los Angeles, and of course big in the news lately because of all the fires, lots of them. I think all told there may have been 7. Some were smaller and put out quickly. I live in Conejo Valley, which if you're in the San Fernando Valley and you take the 101 north, but at this point it's actually traveling due west out of the San Fernando Valley and over the Calabasas Ridge there, you drop into another much smaller valley called Conejo Valley. Conejo is the Spanish word for rabbit. So this is Rabbit Valley, and there are a lot of rabbits there. But it's a nice area. It's an area that feels like it's out of the sprawl. I'm only 45 minutes sans traffic from LAX, so I'm still in LA, but you just kind of get a different feel when you go over that ridge at Calabasas. And in fact, when I was dating my wife, living there in Conejo Valley, and I would make the trip from the LA area over the ridge into Conejo, I'd call her and let her know that I had just entered Middle Earth. It just felt different. It felt nice. But it's a great community, and 4 years ago, a big fire there. Got close to our house within a mile. Didn't hurt us, as it turned out. But these fires right now are not happening near our house. The one popped up a few days ago, and it looked like they knocked it down pretty quickly. All the other fires are over the ridge. About 15 miles from us is the closest active fire, and that's the big one, the Pacific Palisades fire. In fact, I drove past that, must have been a week ago today, because I was taking the coast route, heading for the Santa Monica Freeway that would bring me past the airport and to the office there in Long Beach area. And I saw the smoke pumping up from over the ridge from the Palisades area and said a prayer. Oh, Lord, I hope that's not a big one. And fire trucks were screaming down Coast Highway, going the other direction, and that was the beginning. By the time I got home that evening, of course, Pacific Palisades was ablaze, and it continues to burn, although it's been somewhat contained, but thousands of homes have been destroyed. Some of people I know, some Stand to Reason people. So here's the deal. I'm okay, and everybody on our team is okay. We've gotten a lot of missives, emails, calls, EMs, IMs, whatever they're called. Are you okay? Yes, we are okay. Not even a close call. The fire's over the ridge, and the wind is blowing in another direction away from us. Now, it doesn't mean it can't pick up. Yesterday was a rough day, wind coming from the east, and they've been shutting the electricity down in different places. We lost 3 days yesterday. We're supposed to be out we lost 3 days last week of electricity, and this week it's supposed to be down right now. I don't know what's happening in our home. But that's just to protect from having more wildfires start. Some of them have been contained. Some are still burning. Palisades the biggest, etc. Nobody on our team has been personally affected by that. Now, 3 weeks ago, right after the election, John Noyes' neighborhood, over another ridge further west from where I'm at in the Camarillo area, that's where John lives, they had a bad fire. And the fire was so funny because it moved selectively. And you'd go through the neighborhood now, I see a bunch of homes standing, and then a lot with a totally burned out house. And then here and there we see that happening. A lot of homes were lost in that fire. John's was not. We were all praying hard and the fire burned up his backyard, burned up part of his front yard, burned up the trampoline in the backyard, scorched the side of his house, but didn't touch the house. They had smoke damage and that kind of thing, but nevertheless, thank God for that. But there was a lot of people suffered. So just letting you know, since people have been calling us, we're okay. We do know some people that are part of the Stand to Reason community have contacted us, and we're praying for you, as we are specifically, and we're praying for the community at large here in Southern California, and hoping there's some important lessons that are learned as a result of this great tragedy. But thank you for your calls and your cards and your queries about how we're doing. And for those of you who are just, we know you're praying for us. Some of you just told us that, but we just know our community. And we're in Southern California, and Southern California is on fire. You're going to be praying for us. So thank you for that. And we trust the Lord in all of this. And he has spared us at the moment, and still big winds the rest of the week. Santa Ana's blowing from the desert. They're easterlies blowing west, and that's the big problem. They blow hard, and they blow hot, and we're already pretty dry. So just wanted to let you know about that. Now, the blogosphere kind of has lit up in the last week or so, a couple of weeks, and it has, especially the area that has to do with Christian apologetics, because of some events that took place that I want to mention to you, because it would be worthwhile for you, in my view, to become familiar with these. In fact, actually, it's just in this last week, there are 3 names that came up for me that were not on my radar at all, and 2 of those names are going to disappear really quickly. In fact, they're pretty much gone. I have to keep reading my notes to get the names right. But another name is going to stick with me for a long time. And those names are Mark Menard, Billy Carson, and Wesley Huff. Now, Mark Menard and Billy Carson live in Florida. Wes Huff lives in Ontario, Canada. And actually, Wes he's with Apologetics Canada, and he's working on a PhD in textual criticism and ancient Near Eastern languages, and he's got a broad base of understanding about a lot of these things. He's in his early 30s, and he's a friend of Tim Barnett's. And Tim was the one who let us know that Mark Menard, who has about 250,000 followers for his podcast, had his friend and neighborhood buddy, Billy Carson, who also has his own podcast, on his show. They've been on each other's shows before, but Billy Carson is kind of a self-styled Middle East, ancient Near Eastern expert, and traveled around the world and has lots of ideas about a lot of stuff, and has been particularly critical of certain things about Christianity, in particular textual issues, the Gospels, for example, or the Old Testament writings and the book of Genesis. And so what Mark decided to do is have Billy come on a show and invite Wes to take the other side as a thoughtful Christian and respond to Billy Carson's challenges. So that's the genesis of this whole kerfuffle, I guess you might say, that has taken place over the last week or so, when the interview was aired. And I actually don't know that. I think it was aired on mid-October, actually. And so it's been a couple of months since it was aired. Or maybe it was recorded in mid-October and aired recently. But in any event, it's available. And Amy will put the links in the show notes for this interview and for another interview I'll talk about in a moment in the Joe Rogan show. But what happened in this interview, and I'm not going to give you the blow-by-blow, it's a 2-hour-long interview. And Billy Carson weighed in as he does. He gives, I don't know if he gives seminars, or he was actually on Joe Rogan. So he's a large enough profile person to attract the attention of Joe Rogan and be a guest on his show, talking about these critiques that he has based on his research and scholarship. And in this particular case, since Mark Menard did not feel up to the task of answering Billy Carson's challenges, he asked Wes Huff, who he discovered on the internet somehow, if Wes would come in and have a kind of friendly conversational debate about these issues, which Wes was willing to do. By the way, Wes had 24 hours notice. But it wasn't a formal debate, and he was familiar with some of the things Billy Carson was talking about, and given his education and training, he felt he was capable for the task, and he was. In fact, this is one of those interviews that is discomforting because, what's the best way to put this? Billy Carson, let me back up and put it this way. Wes Huff did a superb job of demonstrating that Billy Carson's claims, the ones that he's been promoting, were not sound at all. Now, to put it that way is kind of an understatement. It was really awkward watching what was going on. And some have said this one debate ended Billy Carson's career. Now, I didn't even know he had a career because I didn't even know who he was. And I don't know who Mark Menard is. He's the one who hosted this thing. But since then, as people have seen this, and it's worth watching for a number of reasons. One, because of the issues discussed, the reliability of the documentation, New Testament documentation in particular, that's Huff's specialty. But he's also a very, very gracious and very thoughtful and very, I would say, clever, not slick, but clever conversationalist in these kinds of circumstances. He knows how to maneuver well. He doesn't overstate his case. He's very gracious. He's very kind. He's working hard not to make anybody feel silly. But this is what ended up happening because the claims that Billy Carson had been making were just false, and demonstrably so. Again, I'm not going to get into the blow-by-blow. I just want to encourage you to watch it so you could see a very, very capable defense of Christianity, at least on the textual issues, by somebody who knows his stuff. Oh, that's Wes Huff. He's almost done with his PhD in this field, and he made a comment at one point where he says, well, my Akkadian's a little rusty. You know, that ancient Near Eastern dead language, like Sumerian and Akkadian, and he's conversant in these. He knows about these things, and of course, he reads the Greek. But anyway, so he knows his stuff, and he very graciously but very capably refuted Billy Carson's claims. Now, he did so well. I want to read what a respondent who had been an atheist and also a fan of Billy Carson posted where the Mark Menard discussion was posted on Menard's site. And here's what he says. I hope Wes sees this comment. I have been an atheist that believed many of Billy's claims for my entire life. Since the debate, I've been watching a lot of your content, speaking now here to Wes, and I'm going to say something I have never said before. Wes has single-handedly dismantled my entire worldview on the Abrahamic doctrines. Not only do I realize how incorrect I've been my entire life, I'm beginning to believe that Christians may actually be right about everything. I can't believe I'm saying that, but it's true. Thanks, Wes, for shattering my worldview and setting me down on a solid foundation. Now, that's just one citation. There are hundreds and hundreds of citations, maybe not that dramatic, but very similar, in response to the show. And so what will help you if you see this, you'll not only be encouraged about the details and see how some people with a little bit of education, or maybe a lot, can get things terribly wrong if they don't really do a deep dive in the particulars they're talking about. And I'm speaking here of Billy Carson, and not just to disparage him. I'm just saying this is the way it worked out. He's not adequate to the task, and many of the things he was saying were just false. And an academic like Wes Huff, who is well studied in these areas and the languages, is able to point this out. And he does so in a gracious way. And that's the other part. It's not just information you will gain from this, but it's also it's a great tutorial in how to be gracious when you know a lot, and you could really, really make your opponent look or feel much more foolish if you were inclined to do that. But he wasn't. That's not his style. And so I'd never heard of Wes Huff before. I found out now he's a friend of Tim's, Tim Barnett, Mr. B, Red Pen Logic. But, I mean, he's on my radar now, and Billy Carson and Mark Menard are fading out. I have no more interest in them. I'm not a YouTube guy. I don't watch all these things, but I did watch a good portion of that debate. It started to get painful. And so you get halfway through and things get painful to watch. Time to change the station. There was another interview, though. I mentioned Joe Rogan a moment ago. Joe had Billy Carson on his show. And when Wes Huff's interview with Billy Carson went public against Billy Carson's wishes, by the way, I mean, he fared so poorly on this discussion that he has been threatening legal action, cease and desist orders from his attorneys that this interview not be published. But it is there online. Wes Huff, WESHUFF. Just put that into YouTube. You're going to find it and a whole bunch of other responses as well. Because Mark went and sent it out, destroyed his friendship with Billy because of the content of the interview. But Joe Rogan got wind of it. And so Joe Rogan invited Wes Huff on, and he was on the show about a week ago. Now it's available online. And, I mean, maybe some Rogan fans out there. I've only seen 3 Rogan interviews, one of them with former President Trump, one of them with Stephen Meyer, and that went really, really well, from the Discovery Institute. And then I watched the entire interview, finished it up last night with Wes Huff. And it was magnificent. It's just magnificent. Because of this friendly conversation, Rogan's very friendly and very open to lots of different things. I almost said odd things, but from some people's perspective, that would be ridiculous. That would be odd. Somebody rising from the dead. But Rogan's going, hey, man, this is a magical world. You all kinds of things are possible. He's not a physicalist. He's not an atheist. But he's certainly capable of warm interactions with people who differ from him, and it gives him something to think about. And he's great like that. Or at least that's what it appeared in the 3 shows that I saw, and very relaxed and capable. And some F-bombs get dropped in here and there from him, just so you know. But during that time, during that 3-hour-plus interview, it was very friendly. And Wes and Joe made like common cause on all kinds of issues. It was like they were 2 peas in a pod. They have different views about things, but they are both curious. And Wes especially is very studied in these areas. And so he was able to bring all kinds of information to bear in the conversation that was academic, that really had a bearing on the reliability of the biblical texts and, as a result, the reliability of the biblical worldview as expressed by the historical figure Jesus of Nazareth. And so it was great watching that. It wasn't like a slam dunk gospel tract interview. It's not Wes's style, apparently, and it wasn't appropriate for the circumstances. He just spread this stuff out over 3 hours, and then right towards the end, he asked the question of Joe Rogan, what do you think about Jesus? Then Rogan gave his point of view, and he said, I'm not sure. Maybe this, maybe that, maybe the other thing. And then what Wes did is very artfully kind of filled in the gaps and made the case for Christ in a very powerful way. All right. So again, not a gospel tract, but if you watch the Rogan one, especially, the first is a tutorial on how to deal with an objector, especially when you know the answers and the objector, Billy Carson in this case, doesn't, and turns out to be actually misrepresenting the facts. I'm not speaking to his motives at all. I'm just saying this is the way it was. The second is a tutorial in a friendly interaction with someone who doesn't share the ideological views of Christians, but is curious about it, and is willing to muse together about these kinds of things. And I think that Wes does a fine job of navigating that really well. And I learned a lot of stuff from Wes by listening to that. So I'm just going to commend that interview to you. That's the Joe Rogan with the qualification I mentioned about the language. And also if you'd like the Billy Carson interview that Mark Menard sponsored mid-October. But if you just go into YouTube and just type in Wesley Huff, this is not going to be hard to find. Like I said, Amy will have the links to both those interviews in the show notes, probably. But no worries about finding it. Everybody's talking about it, and you could watch dozens and dozens of responses on other shows. Some didn't like what he said. It's interesting, just before he went on the show, though, I watched a 6 or 7 minute piece that Wes Huff made himself to correct himself. Because when you have 3 hours plus talking non-directionally, it's like stream of consciousness about a wide variety of issues, you're gonna mess up. You're gonna get some things wrong. Everybody does that. At one point, he said Noah went in the belly of the whale. That was Jonah, or the big fish, or whatever, So there, I just misspoke, right? It just happens. And so he went through his talk, and he identified a whole bunch of things that he said that weren't quite exactly precisely correct, and then fixed them. Said, my bad. But he wasn't trying to deceive anybody. It's just the kind of thing that happens in these kinds of engagements. And I've been there before. I've done it myself. We all have, haven't we? I mean, I can't remember my daughter's names. For some reason, I have the wires crossed. So every time I go to refer, let me pause for a minute to get it right now, to Eva, my youngest, I use the name Annabeth, my eldest. And when I go to refer to Annabeth, my eldest, I use the name Eva, my youngest. So it's duh. Now, lots of dads do that, right? Okay, got it. But that happens in other things too. And so, we just move on. And so but it was fun because people were straining at some of these little missteps. And so he just made a quick video. It says, my bad, I got it. And I'm learning. And some things I just said, I didn't speak as precisely as I could have. That's created some confusion. It sounded like I overstated when I was being hyperbolic a little bit, exaggerating for the sake of effect, but just for clarity's sake. If I had to do it over again, here's the way I'd say it. So this is great. This is a guy who's teachable, who's careful, and who is not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. He's a good guy. I hope I meet him before too long. I'm really thrilled about how he comported himself and the work that he did. This Rogan interview has now given him an opportunity to do some other big things. Not debates. He's not interested in that. In fact, he said, my schedule's full for the entire year. I got a family. I'm married. I got kids. I'm finishing up my PhD. I got things I can't debate everybody. But certainly there are going to be leveraged opportunities for him to do the same kind of thing. And if he does, I encourage you to watch Wesley Huff, Huff, because you're going to learn some stuff content-wise, but you're also going to learn how an exceptionally capable ambassador for Christ maneuvers well with gentleness and reverence in high-pressure circumstances. And there's some lessons you can glean from that. Watching other people do it well, you could ask yourself, well, that was good. What was he doing? What was he doing? Oh, he didn't fire back. He asked a question. That's a clarification question. Oh, that was a good move. Now he got more information. Now he's able to respond. So you're going to see things like that, and I want this experience to be a tutorial for you. Now, there's more here that I could talk about. I got some callers on board. I want to get to them in just a minute, but maybe I'll just save this for a little. I have another reflection based on something that was said. Let me offer this thought quickly. There's two reflections. Here's the quick one, then I'll get to some calls after the break. And that is, there was an intimation. There was a lot of talk about aliens. All right. And this apparently is a big interest for Billy Carson. How did the Egyptians know how to make the pyramids and what they did? And there's a lot of amazing things there, no question. I mean, I've been to Egypt, I've been to Cairo, and I've been at the bottom of that big giant pyramid. Is it Cheops or Giza, whatever? It's the big one. I've been at the very bottom. You go down this tunnel, it's spooky. But each of those blocks, and there's a gazillion of them forming that pyramid, weighs, tons and tons and tons. 50 tons. How do they do that? Also, there's a lot of talk about extraterrestrials. And this is something that Joe Rogan, is curious about. But there was a kind of an intimation in the conversation, not directly spoken, but kind of an intimation that if we ever really make contact with these extraterrestrials, they can tell us the truth about the matter, about God and Jesus and the resurrection, all that other. They'll square it all away. We will be able to know the truth about these big questions. And my response is, what makes you think that's the case? If there was a genuine, we'll just stipulate, a real alien, E.T., showed up and was communicating with us, and the alien says there is no God, I think there's a lot of people who would say, oh, the alien knows better than we do. He must be right. There's no God. I actually think that's most people's reaction. This is what they would, their standard response. And this is why the question comes up at different times and was intimated at in these interviews. And my question is, what my question would be of the alien, how do you know that? What are the reasons that you think there is no God? Now, if you read the tactics book, this is the Rhodes Scholar tactic, which in this case you might call it the alien scholar tactic. And it's a version of the authoritative witness kind of thing, Just because you have a really smart person telling you something is so doesn't mean they're right. What matters is not their opinion, but the reasons for their opinion. And that's why when you have this kind of witness in a trial, an expert witness, after they make their statements in support of, say, one of the accused or whatever, then what happens next? Cross-examination. And somebody else gets a chance to review to see if what was said was really reliable. And it's the same thing we would do with anybody. Yeah, but these aliens are really smart. You know what? There are gazillions of really, really smart people in the world who don't believe in God. Yeah, but they got great technology. They made it to Earth. And there are lots of people who invented great technology who don't believe in God. Just because you can invent great technology and you're really, really smart does not mean you've come to the right conclusions about the nature of reality. Maybe, maybe not. How do you find out? You ask the questions. You have to look at the reasons. What are the reasons that you think Jesus was an alien? Now, as far as I can tell from the historical record we have, he didn't seem to think that, not in the sense that people are talking. He was God become man. Before Abraham was, I am, John 8, right? In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, And apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. Now, let's first 3 verses of John, the Gospel of John, and, well, that's no regular human being. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, right? We beheld his glory. So, in one sense, he is an alien, but not the kind of alien that these guys are talking about. This is the God-man, Emmanuel, God with us. And but we know that from the record. Any other far-fetched ideas have to be justified some way. You can't just say it. You have to justify it. And this is why it's odd. There are people who dismiss all of the classical claims about Jesus. Oh, he's not God. He didn't rise from the dead. He's whatever, this, that, and the other thing. And you can't believe that stuff because that was written in the Bible. You can't trust the Bible. Okay, I get that. I get what you're saying. So who do you think Jesus was? Well, here's who I think he was. Now, that's the move they can't make. Because once they tell me who they think he was, I'm going to ask them where they're getting their information from. And the primary source historical material we have for the information on Jesus are the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that they have just dissed and said you can't trust them. Well, if you can't trust them, okay, well, maybe that's true. But that means there is no Jesus then to have an opinion about. That is the move you can't make. That is the move that's not justifiable. It's not reasonable. If we know something, it's based on information. If you diss the source of information, then you can't trust the information. Then you can't render an educated opinion about that. I don't know how else to say it. Pretty straightforward to me. All right, let's take a break. Got a calls coming up here on Stand to Reason. I'm Greg Koukl. All right, back at you, friends. Greg Koukl here, and keep in mind that tickets have been on sale now for our Reality Student Apologetics conferences this spring, and that includes the live stream for Dallas, Texas, coming February 21st and 22nd. All right, that's the only event we live stream on. The other ones, of course, you can go to. Philly's coming up March 21st and 22nd. The earlier deadline for that one is January 24. And Dayton, Ohio, this is our first time in Middle America for Reality, April 25th and 26th. All the details are at realityapologetics.com. And I'm just saying that we've got a lot of feedback from the fall presentations in Southern California, Seattle, and Minneapolis that some people said this is the best reality they ever attended. And these would be from students who are multiple attendees, obviously. But so this is a great one. J. Warner Wallace wasn't with us last season. He's back again, and he's just fabulous, of course. We have Jason Jimenez back and Megan Allman back. We've got our entire team, Stand to Reason speakers that are part of Reality, of course. They're always front and center. So we encourage you to sign up for Dallas, February 21st, 22nd. The early bird deadline is passed. By the way, we are on, last year we almost sold out. I think we did sell out. And this year we're further ahead, given the dates, with signups. So if you really want to go to Dallas and you don't want to do the live stream, though that's available, go to the website, realityapologetics.com, and sign up. Or the Philly, March 21st and 22nd, or Dayton, Ohio, April 25th and 26th. All right, let's go to the calls, and we have Paul in Massachusetts on board. Paul, welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing, Greg? Glad to hear that you guys are all safe out there. Thanks for that little update at the beginning of your show.
Well, thank you. By the way, you don't sound like a Massachusetts native because you're not doing the, go park the Conneaut kind of thing like John Noyes.
Just give me a second. I probably will.
Okay, well, that's all right. You can spare me. I was just talking to John earlier, and he'll come out with that kind of stuff because he's a Boston guy,
Oh, yeah. No, I'm a middle Massachusetts guy. Princeton's right smack in the middle of the state.
All right.
Yeah. Hey, and I watched that Billy and Wes debate right after you and Tim were talking about that, a week or two ago.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Wes did a really fantastic job of being very winsome, but yet he did not ever back down. He kind of kept Billy on his toes and didn't let him get away with anything. So that was great.
Yeah. It got a little bit uncomfortable just watching it. Even Joe Rogan made a reference to that. He said, I watched the debate for a little while, and then I went, oh, so I turned it off, and then I come back to it and watch it for a little while, and I go, oh, it's too painful. That was Rogan.
I know, yeah. I'm going to have to watch the Joe Rogan one. I haven't seen that yet, so that's next on my list.
Yeah.
But,
That's good. Well, set aside 3 hours, because that's how long it is. Or you can watch it in pieces like I did with my wife.
Yeah. Hey, I know how you're always saying about bloom where you're planted, and I've been doing that for the past few years. I put together a apologetics course, and I've been teaching that in my church. And just recently, I became your latest outpost director.
Oh, no kidding!
So you can mark down another state off of your list.
Oh, that's great.
Trying to get to all your states. So.
Yeah, I hope that little comment I think I made last week. It isn't formally the goal that I know of the whole program right now, but it's I just kind of made it an informal goal. Let's get every state. That would be 39 we got now, or maybe we're crossed over 40 now.
Yeah, I mean, there's only one other in all of New England, so it's just two of us in all of New England. So,
okay,
glad to be on the map.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad you are too.
Yeah. So I got a question for you this evening. A lot of times I will talk about the attributes of God. I'm getting some feedback. Are you getting that there on your end?
I don't hear it. I just cleared my throat. I thought I pushed my kill button. Maybe you heard me doing that, but it sounds clear to me, and I apologize for what it sounds like at that end.
Okay, no problem. I know sometimes I've argued, certain attributes about God, and one being love, because, he's Trinitarian, and love is an attribute that there has to be more than one person for, love to go from one to the other kind of thing. But then I was thinking about other attributes about God, like mercy. And I'm like, wait a minute, mercy is also contingent on something, and that would be that someone actually needs mercy. But certainly there's no mercy that's needed within the Godhead. So how do I work that out?
Sure. Well, I'm just going to make a suggestion here. Earlier at the break, I was reading your question, and I thought, hey, that's a good question, and it is. And Bill Craig has made a big deal about the God of Islam is an inferior God to the God of the Bible, because God of the Bible is love, where the God of Islam is a Unitarian God, and following your point, there is no love where there isn't. It's a shared quality. And in the case of the Trinity, you have the three members loving each other for eternity. But now you're raising this other question about mercy. I actually don't think, if you went to a systematic theology and looked up the attributes of God, I'm not sure if mercy is going to be one of them. No, I don't deny that God is merciful. I think my suspicion is, and this is what I was thinking about as a way of maybe speaking to your concern here. Mercy may be a subset of God's love. So the main quality is God's love, which shows mercy when needed, or when he decides, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy. So God can distribute his love as he will. Well, certainly if mercy is a subset of love, there's an example. I actually think this is true about love, God's love itself. He can, I don't think that God is obligated to love everyone exactly the same and equally. Now, I think Bill Craig would disagree with me. I'm just saying. But God's grace is unmerited favor. And I think that grace and love are connected too. So it might be mercy is subsumed under love, and grace is subsumed under love, because love is something that is not obligatory. A lot of people make this a case against Reformed theology because they say God will not force you to love. If you're forced to love, then it's not really love. I think there are problems with that statement, but that's another issue. But their claim is that God is forced to love everybody, because in a certain sense, that's the nature of God, that he's kind of obliged, or maybe Bill would say, or somebody like him, I just use him as an example because I know he's talked about this. William Lane Craig would say he's not obliged, he's not acting out of an obligation, he is acting out of the effluence of his own nature, so to speak, the overflow of his nature. But I think there are scriptures that make it pretty clear that God loves some more than others in different ways. You could look at, for example, the Upper Room Discourse, and I think there are two places there in the Gospel of John, between chapter 13 and 17, where Jesus says, if you do this, then the Father will love you and make his abode with you. So there's a conditional. That's a first-class conditional. I mean, if this, then this.
Sure, right.
And it's talking about love. So I don't think there's an obligation there. But I do think, so there's no obligation to love. There's no obligation, therefore, to give mercy. There's no obligation to forgive either. They are all flowing forth from his love. And I think if you look up the classical characteristics of God, you're going to see things like love. You're also going to see omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, things like that. But I don't know if you're going to get mercy as a kind of a separate one. Because if that was the case, then you run into the same concern that Bill Craig has raised against Islam and God being a God of love.
Right.
In what sense does he exercise mercy towards the other members of the Trinity? That doesn't make any sense. So this is my suspicion is that the way to solve it, and I'm just speculating here, but it sounds good to me, is to consider it as a subset of the love of God. What do you think?
I hadn't considered that, and I think that is a very interesting thought. I'll have to think about that some more. Maybe check out, what is it, A.W. Tozer? Doesn't he do a bunch of stuff on attributes of God, I think?
Do you have a systematic that you use in your library?
I've got Grudem's systematic, so I'm sure I can probably check it out in there too.
Yeah.
So I'll have to do a little bit of extra homework and try to see exactly where that gets nailed down. But that's an interesting thought you got there. So appreciate that.
You're welcome. And by the way, let me make another suggestion.
Sure.
I have a couple of older systematics too, and in my view, they're all Reformed, which Grudem is also. But Shedd, S-H-E-D-D, Shedd, the Dogmatics. It's called Shedd's Dogmatics. WCT Shedd or whatever. But this is the one that's edited by Alan Gomes, Gomes. So what Alan's done is he's gone, pardon me?
I said I've heard of that name. Yeah.
Oh, he does a magnificent job, and he actually did this. He gave me a copy. He's at Biola. He gave me a copy, and he said, "This is for your daughter, and you can borrow it until she's old enough to read it." And this is Annabeth when she was 4. So now she's 20.
And you still haven't given it to her.
No, she's not so interested in that. So, but I think Shedd's Dogmatics is really, really, really good. Okay, and there's some others I could recommend, but your hands will be full with Shedd. And these guys that wrote 100 years ago or 150 years ago, they just had this incredible ability to think really carefully about a whole lot of esoteric things that have to do with God, and they cash them out really, really profound ways, in my view. So I just was recommending Gomes's edition of Shedd's Dogmatics.
Okay, I will definitely check that out.
Okay, buddy.
Thanks.
Okay, good chat.
Thanks, Greg.
All right, bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Let's see, time-wise, let's go to Tom in New York. I'm going to find your button, Tom. Hey, Tom, welcome to the show.
Hey, Greg, how are you?
Good. Doing good. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. I'm a strategic partner. I love your ministry.
Oh, that's great. Both are great. Thank you for your partnership, and I'm glad you love what we're doing. Or you probably wouldn't be a partner if you didn't.
Right. I'm teaching a class on tactics at my church this this semester, the spring term,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm excited about that.
Good. Thank you.
I have a question. When I'm at church during the worship time, I don't feel like I'm giving God nearly enough. I don't understand worship. When I have my private time at home, I start my prayer time thinking of ways to praise him in terms of who he is, how great he is, and that kind of thing. But is there biblical, is there a biblical way to worship God? I feel very awkward raising my hands at church. It doesn't feel authentic to me. I feel like I'm thinking about how awkward I look, and not I'm not thinking about God. If I were to raise my hands, raise them back and forth.
I get that.
I'm not disparaging other people who do it. I'm just saying it's for me. How can I give God more at church biblically? What is worship? What am I supposed to be doing?
Well, I don't think there's one answer to the second question, what am I supposed to be doing? The first question, worship is ascribing worth to God. So you are acknowledging the worth that God has, and because God is God, you're not ascribing the worth on a peer level. You are looking up to where God is, so to speak. All right. So I could say, hey, Tom, you're doing a great job in that tactics thing, and I could peer to peer. I could say, good job, whatever. So I'm ascribing worth to you for what you've done, but it's a peer level. In this case, though, the worth that we're ascribing to God, we're acknowledging that God has, is so far beyond us. We are in a position of, just below God. I guess I'm thinking spatially. And so this is why not only do we look up sometimes when we worship or raise our hands up, all right, because it's a physical way, though God isn't spatial, he's not up there. It's a physical way of acknowledging that he's so much greater than we are. So if you think of worship in that sense, ascribing worth to God, all right? Okay, now how do you do that? There are lots of ways of doing that. You can do that vocally, and you can do that physically. Usually they're combined. So if you are affirming God's goodness or the good things that he has done, it may be that your body adopts a certain posture. It might be that your hands come up. For me, I was, became a Christian during the Jesus movement, and a lot of Pentecostal kind of influence there. And so people raising their hands, it was natural. But, sitting on your hands is just fine. I don't think when you're ascribing worth to God, the important thing is what you're doing, not how you're doing it. And there are different ways people ascribe worth to God that are authentic to them. And in fact, a very practical matter, if you're thinking about raising your hands and it's not natural, and then you're thinking about your hands being raised around all these other people, then you're not thinking about ascribing worth to God, are you?
Correct.
So this is, you want to adopt the posture that is natural for you, and can help you focus on ascribing worth, okay? And in the morning, not this morning, but yesterday morning, because I got up and came to the office. Excuse me, I do my time with the Lord on my ride into the office on Tuesdays. But yesterday morning, I have a little songbook that's from the Jesus movement days, and there are songs in it that mean a lot to me. But I kind of get my motor moving sometimes by a song, and I sing it in a way quietly, in a way that's meaningful to me. Sometimes I change from the third person to the first person, and so in my song, I'm talking to Jesus in the song rather than talking about Jesus in the song. So I just adjust it so I'm more intimately connecting with him when I say these things. So the posture is going to be different, and for different people. And I was just reading something the other day that was talking about the posture of prayer and gave about 6 or 7 different postures described in Scripture: standing, hands raised, kneeling, laying down face down, sitting, walking. There are all these different motifs that you can employ that are appropriate at different times. Okay? There are going to be times when you're going to worship God, with your head way down, not your head up, because you're awed in his presence, So there's a range of things there. I wouldn't worry about that. The Psalms tell a lot about worship, and I'm looking right now at Psalm 150 because this is a characteristic place where I see this couplet. And it says, verse 2, praise him for his mighty deeds. And then it says, praise him according to his excellent greatness. So there's two categories we have. We praise him for what he does, and we praise him for who he is. So when you're thinking about worshiping, that's what ought to be going on. Whether you're singing or whether you're by yourself or with a group or whatever. Now, I actually think, and now I just got a few minutes left here for this hour, but I can't talk a lot about this. It's probably good I have a brief time because I could get on a rail about it, and that wouldn't be good, a rant. But I've been in a lot of churches where worship leaders hurt the worship. And they do that in different ways. One, they sing off tune. So you're singing a song that you think you know, and the worship leader is leading you in the wrong direction because he's either singing it without a tune, or he's flat, or he's monkeying with it and being clever with it. I was at a worship service just recently, let me put it that way, where the worship leader transposed to an upper, key or whatever, octave, whatever it is, in the middle of a sentence. A lot of times you'll do that for the chorus or at the next sentence. He did it right in the middle, and he pulled everybody. It was like, what? So here I'm trying to focus on God, and I'm jerked back to my conscious self in my moment by this behavior of the worship leader. I think worship leaders ought to just sing the melody clearly and accurately. In fact, I've said sometimes worship leaders ought to be behind everybody. Put them in the back of the church so they don't distract you. Let them lead you in.
Put them in the back.
Yeah, that's right. They're distracting oftentimes. And so, anyway, I just have a lot of complaints about the way worship is done. But if you're in a church where hymns are being sung, for example, I like the hymns. I don't mind the modern stuff as long as people just stay with the melody. If the content is sound and the music is beautiful, all right, that's key. And then somebody stays on tune, then fine. Now I can get into that. But if there's a habit now, and I don't know where it came from, I call it the bad Bob Dylan, right? Okay. Oh, the times they are changing, that. And this is the way they're singing these worship songs. But they can't do a good Bob Dylan. They're doing a bad Bob Dylan. They flatten out the song and do all those screens. It is hard to follow, and it sounds bad. Even the beautiful songs sound bad. So there was one song recently, and I didn't know the melody. I'm trying to follow it until I finally get to the chorus, and I think, oh, I know this song. But I couldn't tell it was that song because of the way the worship leader is leading it. So back to your point, and off my rant. When you worship with a group, you want to be able to focus on the beautiful music that assaults God. Get out of ourselves. That's what we want. Away from us, thinking about God, not about me. That's why I don't like worship services worship songs are meant to celebrate my own emotions, because I'm not having those emotions lots of times when I'm at church, So anyway, there's some thoughts, and I just got 15 seconds. So I hope, Tom, that's helpful to you. It's just kind of get you going a little bit and have you more satisfying worship in your worship time, whenever it is.
Thanks. And I'm going to ask God to help me ascribe more worth to him. Would that be okay? Wait,
say that again?
I want to ask God, help me ascribe worth to you.
Yes, of course.
I run out of
That's
ideas.
a great prayer.
I run out of words.
That's a great prayer. All right, it's a good way to close out, too. Yeah, thanks so much, Tom. That's it for the show. Greg Koukl here for Stand to Reason. Give them heaven, all right? Bye-bye now.